Alright, we're going to do equations of lines today, so let's take a look. Alright guys, here's the three forms that we can write equations. So first was slope-intercept form we saw yesterday, y equals mx plus b. M's the slope, rise over run, and then b was the y-intercept where it crossed the y-axis, or where we started our graphs. We talked about how that was the best way to graph because you just start at your y-intercept and then you count up your slope and count over your run of your slope. Okay? Now, if they give you a point in a slope, we can use point slope form. Okay? This one's really helpful when we want to get a point in a slope and then we want to write it into a different form. Okay? So, m is our slope, x1, y1 is just a point they give us. Standard form, okay, is what we graphed with a little bit yesterday when we had something x plus something y equals c. Rules for standard form is a, b, and c can't be fractions. A has to be positive, so the term with the x has to be positive. And then when we have those numbers, we have to make sure that they're reduced. So if I can divide them all by something, I'll do that. All right, go ahead and pause it and write these down. All right, here are our steps. If we got a point and a slope, and we want to put it into slope-intercept form or standard form. First, you sub in your m and your x1, y1 into point slope form. Then distribute your into the parentheses. Then once we get y by itself, that's slope-intercept form. Then we'll get our x and a y to the same side to get standard form. And then 5, make sure that that first term's positive, and if there's any fractions, we need to get rid of them. So let's take a look at an example, and those steps should make a little bit more sense when we do that. So first we're going to find the equation of a line in slope-intercept form with the slope of -4 that passes through the point -2, 5. Okay, so slope-intercept form, that's y equals mx plus b. That's what we want our final answer to look like. Okay, so I have a point though and a slope. So anytime I have a point and a slope, okay, this is just my m and this is my x1, y1. So we're going to use point slope form, which was y minus y1 equals m and then x minus x1. Okay. Now we're just going to plug in what we know. So I'm going to do y minus y1, which is 5, equals slope, which is -4, then x minus x1, which is -2. Okay. That's important that I put it as minus and then my -2 in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit. Okay, I have y minus 5 equals -4. Then x plus 2. Okay, because 2 negatives make a positive. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and distribute this -4 to both of these. So I have y minus 5 equals -4x. Okay, and then -4 times 2 is -8. All right, I just distributed. Now I'm going to get y by itself because this all I want up here is y equals mx plus b. So y by itself. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Now notice I'm not going to do it to the 4, just the one that it can combine with. So I have y equals -4x. -8 plus 5 is -3. I have y by itself. So if I look, I have y equals m is -4, x plus my b would be -3. So it looks kind of like that slope-intercept form, but just with numbers for your m and your b. Okay. That's it. Now we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines have the exact same slope. That's the big thing to get away from this note from parallel lines, is that they have the same slope. So parallel is the same, okay, when we're talking about slopes. Okay. Now, if I look, my red line and my blue line, okay, notice they're parallel. They won't ever cross. And if I look at my slopes, the slopes are the same. They have the same slope. Now for perpendicular lines, okay, so the ones that make the T or make a right angle, okay, their slopes are opposite reciprocal. So parallel is the same. Perpendicular is opposite reciprocals. So opposite reciprocals, you might want to note that this is when you flip your fraction and change the sign. So reciprocal is when we flip it, and opposite means we're just going to change if it was positive or negative. Okay, so if I look, my red line, the slope is negative 2/3, but my blue line, the slope is a positive, and then we flip the fraction, so 3/2. All right, so let's take a look at an example. So find the equation of the line that is parallel to the line y equals 2/3 x minus 7 and passes through the point 3, -1. Then convert to standard form. Okay, so we want to get it in standard form at the very end, so that means we want ax plus by equals c. Now, we're going to have to go through slope-intercept form to get there, so let's go ahead and look at this though. All we need is a point, which we have, x1, y1, and a slope. Well, we don't have a slope exactly, but it tells me that the line is parallel to this line. So we know that parallel lines have the same slope. So I know that my new slope is going to be, my new m, or my new slope, is 2/3. Okay, and we already have a point, that 3, -1, so we're going to use point slope form, which was y minus y1 equals m, then x minus x1, just like we did a couple slides ago. So now let's plug in what we know. So we have y minus -1 equals 2/3, okay, x minus 3. Now I know y minus -1 is actually just y plus 1. I'm going to distribute this 2/3 to both of those, so that's going to be 2/3 x, okay, 2/3 times 3. We can just cancel out the 3's and see it'll be -2, or 2 times -3 is -6, divided by 3 is -2. Okay, so that's our equation. Now we got to keep moving. We need to get it in slope-intercept, so I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So y equals 2/3 x minus 3. Now it's in slope-intercept form. I want it in standard form up here. So I need to get x on the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2/3 x from both sides. Okay, so that gives me -2/3 x plus y equals -3. Now, if we look at the very first slide when we talked about standard form, our rule is our first number with the x can't be negative, and we can't have a fraction. So I'm going to times everything by a -3. The negative to get rid of the negative, and the 3 to get rid of that 3 as the denominator. So I'm going to multiply everything by 3. I'm going to write it over here. I'm going to change colors so it doesn't get confused. Okay, so I'm going to have negative times a negative is positive 2x, because those 3's cancel out. Then it would be times it by -3 times y is -3y, equals -3 times -3 is +9. There's my equation in the standard form. Okay, so it's kind of a process to get to that final answer, but you just got to go through each of those steps, plug them in, then work it out to get the x and y on the same side. Alright guys, let's look at another example. So find the equation that is perpendicular to y equals -2x plus 1, passes through the point 6, 3, then convert it to standard form. So here's my x1 and y1. I right away see that there's a point. Now I need a slope. Well, I know perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So I'm going to look at -2. Okay, so my new slope is the opposite reciprocal slope. This is technically over 1. Okay, so it's going to be a positive, so opposite, so positive, and then instead of 2/1, it's going to be 1/2. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and set this up in a point slope form, so y minus y1, which is 3, equals my m, which is 1/2, okay, then x minus 6. Now I'm going to go ahead and distribute. Okay, so I have y minus 3 equals 1/2 x. Half of 6 is 3, so minus 3. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and add 3 to both sides. So I have y equals just 1/2 x, and then -3 plus 3 is just 0. So for these purposes, I'm going to put a plus 0, because I know I'm going to have to put it in a standard form, so I'm going to just leave the plus 0 there. Okay, now I need to get x and y on the same side for standard form, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1/2 x from both sides. So I'm going to have negative 1/2 x plus y equals just 0. Now I can't have a fraction, I can't have a negative, so I'm going to times everything by 2 to get rid of that 1/2, or get rid of the 2 on the denominator, and I need to get rid of the negative, so I'm actually going to multiply everything by a -2. Okay, so I'm going to have 1x minus 2y equals 0 times -2 is just 0. Okay, so there is my answer in standard form. One of the big things on these problems is to make sure you're keeping track of your signs, especially when we're multiplying and adding things. You really got to be careful. Use the calculator if you need to. Now try your practice problems.